Welcome to the podcast. We're going to read into the world of the independent bookseller, books and the authors that write them, and the publishing industry more broadly. I'm interested to see the quirky ways that quirky creatives make a living in a world that Amazon is disrupting. I'm A.B. Frank, and this is the Bookish Report. Hello and welcome to episode 3 of the Bookish Report podcast. And in this episode I'm going to be interviewing the Bookshop Band. Now, the Bookshop Band makes songs based on books and performs their music in bookshops. How can you not like that? The first time I heard about these was in Sean Bithell's book, who I interviewed in episode 2. And then I keep seeing bits and pieces of them on YouTube. So I tried to get an interview with them, didn't I? At the Wigtown Book Festival in September 2019, I had the chance to join the band, which is made up of Beth and Ben. We had a cuppa, and I interviewed them about their songs, about how they started up, and about their creative process. However, landing this interview was a complete fluke. It was a Sean Bithell fiasco all over again. If you didn't listen to the way I got the interview with Sean Bithell, go back to episode 2 and give that a listen right at the start. But like that interview, the Bookshop Band one was meant to be. I'd been in touch with them via DM on Instagram prior to the festival, but I'd not heard back from them, so naturally I thought that I wouldn't be meeting them, that they'd be too busy. I did have an interview booked with Jane Baldwin, though, from Curly Tail Books in Wigtown, and we was walking to a bar to do our interview, and we walked past Beth and Ben. And I mentioned to Jane that I wanted to interview them, so she turned 180 degrees, went back, and introduced me to them, which I thought was really nice. Beth took my number and we parted ways. And the next morning, because I'd not heard from Beth that day, I got into Wigtown from where I was staying and went into the pub for a cup of tea. Well, that's what I was going to do. I didn't realise it was the pub where the Bookshop Band were hosting a networking breakfast type thing, and that they'd be doing that throughout the festival. So when I walked in, I saw them clearing the room after their event, so they had obviously finished and they were alone. So I saw this as a bit of an opportunity. I approached them, said good morning and we did the interview then and there. Here is that interview. So what are your names to start off with? Beth and
Ben.
And Ben.
Yeah.
Is that short for Benedict?
Yes, it is, yeah.
I don't know where I read that.
Yeah.
But I read that somewhere. I've never seen Benedict short, or anybody's called Ben that is short for that.
Normally
right, yeah.
Benjamin, isn't it?
Yeah, I never thought that it might stand for that.
Yeah.
Is it you that's an expert in animal impressions, or is that just a joke on the website?
Where have you found this information? I do a couple. Yeah.
Can we hear one?
This is my dolphin. I don't really know if they sound like this or not. I can't do it as well as I used to be able to do it. Yeah, it used to be better. Yeah. I think my face has changed.
How did you find out you could do that?
I don't know. It was just one of those strange things. There's one that doesn't come across so well on the audio, but I've got a bullfrog impression as well. That's
amazing. Can you tell us a bit about yourselves, like before you started the Bookshop Band?
Before we started the Bookshop Band, so I was in a band called Eurison, which was a sort of indie folk band based in London, and I also did lots of environmental film work out in East Africa, so I'd spend like 3 or 4 months out there doing that, and then on and off throughout the year, and then I'd come back and be in a band, and then eventually those two things came to an end. Oh, Molly's found her audiobook, that's great. and then came to Bath and started the Bookshop Band with Beth.
Yeah. And I went to uni in Bath, and after uni I stayed there and ended up playing with lots of local bands and musicians, and hadn't really ever written a song before, but started playing with these people, playing cello with other songwriters, and then gradually got into thinking, actually maybe I could write some songs as well. But I was playing with Eliza Carthy, who's a folk fiddle player, and a few local Bath and Bristol bands. There's quite a lot of music going on in Bristol as well. And I had worked at Real World Studios, which was Peter Gabriel's studios in Box, and so that was quite a good introduction to meeting lots of. I mean, I was just changing beds and washing up, but it was an introduction to quite a few engineers and producers and things. So
you both got like a creative, performing type background.
Yeah, very much so.
Yeah. Are you like the first to do this sort of thing in bookshops, or is there other people elsewhere doing it as well?
I think people have written songs inspired by books and story. Well, but certainly inspired by stories for so long. Is this the best book to have given Molly?
Definitely.
People have written songs inspired by stories for as long as they've written songs, and as long as they've written stories, probably. So there's nothing new in that. And obviously there's a great repertoire of sort of contemporary pop songs inspired by books. Like if you look into Google, Wuthering Heights, and songs that you never knew were inspired by a book.
Yeah.
Lots of Radiohead songs and all sorts. There's hundreds. I think we're the only band who have actually, we forming the Bookshop Band was never an idea. It was something that came out of what we were doing. It was we were writing songs in collaboration with our local bookshop, and so over the years we just wrote all these songs inspired by books, and they were performed in the bookshop. They were performed in front of the author. The author's work inspired the book, so it very much came out of that specific. What we do comes out of that specific context of writing songs in a bookshop with authors, and I don't think, well, to our knowledge, I don't think people have done that.
No, but I think bookshops are a great place to play, and I think there's a few bookshops in Britain certainly that lend themselves well to a performing space, and so some have turned themselves into a bit of that as well.
Yeah, do they do that maybe as a little bit of diversification, or to add something?
Yeah, I
different?
think so. Having slightly different events and things. So I think there are bookshops that have opened themselves up to music.
Yeah, no, because I'm really interested in like what Sean Biddle's doing with like the Random Book Club, and sort of branching out into different things to help sort of add revenue streams, and like something like you're doing is really like unique and innovative in some ways.
Oh, thank you.
So we're at the Wigtown Book Festival, and do you host this breakfast like every morning, or do you just attend?
We've been doing it for a few years now, actually. So this is the first year where we're doing the Booktown breakfast every morning, which with a baby, with Molly is.
This is Molly.
This is Molly.
Say hello.
Can you say hello?
Say hello.
Hello.
It's quite difficult getting ready. So we come to these events completely unprepared. We know nothing about the authors that are going to be joining us. It's very much a sort of an hour of discovery for us as much as anything. Asking probably very stupid questions, but it's always a lovely, informal, relaxed start to the festival, really.
Yeah.
And all the authors we get will be doing something later in the day, so it's a chance for people to get a little taster, and then to go and see them later if they enjoy that.
So how long have you both been coming to the festival there?
We first came here. Well, we couldn't come to the first festival we were asked to do because we were getting married. That was 2014. And then so we came.
So Molly is very much part of the band.
So we came here. We actually came up here anyway in 2014, but in the summer, and but then the first actual festival we did was 2015, and we ran the Open Book, which is the Airbnb bookshop, as you know, and. We had some friends stay up with us, and they did a little singing workshop in the morning. We did a lunchtime concert, and then they did a learn a Scottish tune a day kind of concert in the afternoon. So, and then we'd take a walk down to the Bird Hide, and we just kind of fell in love with it over the times we came here, and just kept coming back. Yeah. And then 2016, or the following year, found out I was pregnant with Molly, and we needed somewhere to live. We'd moved out of our place near Bristol. And we decided that for some reason this was the place we were going to put some roots down.
Yeah.
So Yeah.
Well, it's a good place for what you do.
Yeah, we haven't regretted it. It's such a beautiful area. The community is amazing.
Yeah, I've liked it being here since I got here on Friday. So I've enjoyed being here.
Great.
And it's great. And obviously the festival, there's a lot more people. There's a real buzz about it. But it's a great place to be all year round as well. Yeah.
Have you ever got a book or a bookshop?
No, the closest we've come is running the open book
Mm.
here in Wigtown, and no, we're kind of just associated with that bookshop in Bath, Mr. B's Emporium of Reading Delights. But we've been mulling over for a long time about doing a book, so we might well do something with that. You know, with all the lyrics and kind of the tours are always fascinating. Just visiting bookshops under a slightly unusual pretense of doing a concert there, all around. Well, starting to be all around the world. So it's we think, and also. It's like we put all our albums onto CDs or vinyl, but we go into a bookshop, so it kind of feels that they should really be in a book form. So I think if nothing else, we'll find a way of getting our music into a book, because that would be the most appropriate way for us to.
How do you find your music being? Do you have digital copies and vinyl and CD?
Yeah.
Which one of those formats performs best? Vinyl's on the rise, isn't it?
Well, the really funny thing is that we'll go to a gig and people will put out our vinyl and our CDs, and it's hard. You can't really sell digital at a gig. You know, you can try and do some download codes, but they don't sell well at gigs. We put vinyl up, and people quite often come up to us and say, "Vinyl is really back in right now, isn't it? It's really on the rise. Everyone's getting vinyl. I wish I hadn't got rid of my vinyl." Then no one buys any at the end of the night. So CDs still at gigs.
Well, we've tried to make them as beautiful as possible as well, and got some different artists involved.
Yeah.
In fact, Ben did the first CDs that we made, and then we've got some friends who are artists to do covers for the next 9. We did 9 albums in a year.
Wow.
A few years ago, and we just got different artists, mostly friends and family, and so we've tried to make them, beautiful and relevant to the stories and the songs.
So how many albums do you have?
Got 13.
Yes,
now.
and a little bit of a backlog of, probably about 15 or 16 albums worth, but haven't recorded the next ones yet.
We've just started though. We're actually going to bring out a live album before the end of the year, because we did a tour in America and we recorded all the concerts, and so going to do a best of American tour album.
Yeah.
And then we've just started recording our 14th studio album with Pete Townsend producing it, so that should be quite interesting collaboration.
Yeah. The next question was, you just said you went to America. I was going to say, do you follow a festival circuit and around the UK or Europe or the world?
No, there's no circuit for what we do. We have to kind of make
the literature circuit, I suppose, in terms of book festivals, a little bit, but it's very much touring bookshops, really. So
there is no sort of music touring circuit in the bookshop world, so that's very much something we just had to sort of make in order to do it.
Yeah. So what we did in America was pretty much all bookshops or libraries, and we played for the American Booksellers Association conference in Albuquerque in New Mexico. So it was an amazing experience. The audiences were great, and we were very welcomed there and had a really nice time.
Did you have fans there already, or was that the first exposure of your stuff?
Mostly the first exposure, really, but we'd been in touch with all the bookshops and had a chat, and they were all up for it. And then when we went out there for the conference, actually, we knew a few people. In fact, we met some people we knew in New York as well. There were 3 Wigtown links in New York, because there was somebody who lives here. Her daughter lives in New York. And then we had Fred and Kathy, who came to run the open book like we did. They came, I think they travelled a little way to get to it. And then Hope London, who's an artist and musician in Wigtown, happened to be in America as well. So we had this lovely Wigtown crew in our New York Public Library
Yeah,
gig.
It's strange how that sort of thing happens.
Yeah.
Because I'm from Salford in Manchester, and in the B&B outside, about 7 miles from here, there's a guy from 5 minutes down the road.
Really?
Brilliant.
That's so funny,
Yeah,
isn't
there's
it?
something about a 6 foot bald mank standing at the bar sampling an IPA saying that's minging that I didn't expect to see in a village in Scotland. So what does your schedule look like then for when you do these gigs? Is it sporadic or is there a method to it?
Well, I think there used to be a method to it, in that we just what would generally happen is we book like one gig, and then we book another gig like 2 weeks later somewhere else, and we'd just be like, okay, let's try and fill them in. Let's just go on tour for 2 weeks, and we try and book them in, and that was how we used to book tours. And then when Molly came along, well, then we recorded loads and loads of stuff, so we kind of had a year off gigging, and then we had 9 albums to release, so we had a year just gigging as much as we possibly could.
Yeah.
And Molly came along, and now we're kind of rediscovering how to tour and what works, and I guess we still kind of do spot gigs, but it's hard living in Wigtown, going off to the other end of the country to play in a bookshop where you probably you won't earn enough necessarily to cover your travel. So
Yeah.
it's tricky, but we're doing a tour, a proper tour, support tour with the Unthanks in beginning after this festival, with a few other gigs around. So we've basically got a really busy kind of October and November, or from now really, which is great. We really enjoy playing and being on the road. You don't have to worry about cleaning.
Yeah.
Does Molly travel with you?
Yeah, she does. She does at the moment. She's a very good traveller. She's been good so far. I think we got her used to the long journeys quite early on, and her first festival was kind of probably when she was about a month old or something. So she's quite used to being moved around. But then there's something nice about being at home and being in her own space as well. But she's fairly adaptable at the moment, so we're very lucky.
Yeah. Is there a seasonal element, like a busier time of year?
Do you know what? There probably is, but we're not organised to know about it. There probably is a literature.
Yeah. And often you might have I think with music and quite a lot of the arts things in general, quite often you have a quiet January. But actually this year it was one of our busiest Januaries because that's when we went to America. But I was also involved with a project with Jackie Morris and Robert McFarlane called the Lost Word Spell Songs with a few.
Yeah, I'm going to ask you about Robert McFarlane in a minute.
Cool, and we did the writing for that in January and then toured it in February. So it was a really busy start to the year. Whereas normally, you might choose that time to do recording or something quite low key. So I don't know if it is seasonal. And I think with book festivals especially, they're often undercover and they're not necessarily like outdoor summer festivals, music festivals, so they can be any time of year, really.
Cool. Do you ever get invited or approached like Waterstones or anything, or is it just like second-hand bookshops?
It's mostly independent new bookshops, like new books. Mainly because that's where a lot of our authors, with Mr. B's, it's all contemporary new fiction, so a lot of second-hand bookshops wouldn't have a lot of the authors that we've written songs inspired by, because they're all more current. We have played in Waterstones a few times.
Yeah.
It'd be really nice. I think what's really extra special about the independent bookshop scene is that they're so, they're in one way or another they're run by the community, someone who lives in the community. They're curated very much with the community around them in mind, and as such they're it can be really vibey hubs, community hubs, and in the kind of broader sense of the word. We kind of ride with that kind of vibe. So when we play in an independent bookshop, all those people come in, they support that bookshop, and they come to the events, and they're really, really, really part of that. And I think one of the problems with, not problems, but if you have a bigger chain, which Waterstones is one of those, it's nothing about how good or bad the bookshop is. It's just if you're running a chain, you're less involved in the community around you. You've got too many other things to think about. So there tends to be not the same kind of uptake, or it's not quite that community audience that come that I think we work really well with. But that's not, we have played in Waterstones and have really enjoyed it.
Yeah, so I understand what you mean by the local shops will be curated with the themes and books that are written by people and about people of the local area. Like, do you make your songs tailored to the different areas of the bookshops that you go to as well?
I guess not so much. I mean, they're mostly specific to the books themselves. But I think we've talked about the areas and particular bookshops, and we've got a bookshop song.
Yeah.
Yeah. What do you think?
I think I mean, when I say it's not that a lot of bookshops don't actually. They might have a little section of local authors and things, but they kind of carry a similar. They draw from a similar stock, but they curate what they draw into their bookshop. So you have bookshops that have specialities, or nature or non-fiction or children's books or whatever. But within that, there's kind of an inadvertent curation, because they just know their customers and they know what they're going to buy, and they can't put every book in the world in their small space. So they're going to, whether they know it or not, they curate what comes into that for their local audience. So it doesn't necessarily need to be local books, but they just they're only going to bring in great stuff that they love, and I think their customers will love.
Yeah.
And that's different for every bookshop, in every different place. And we've got so many songs now. We it's quite fun trying. We can probably tailor our set and what we play to topics. Or we certainly, when we go into a bookshop, we'll look on the bookshelves and see which books they've actually got in stock that we might do and tailor our set around that as much as we can. So we don't really have a plan until about half an hour before we play as to what we're going to do.
So I saw Molly playing the ukulele, was it, a minute ago? What genre is the music that you make? Like folk? You mentioned you did folk before.
Yeah, I think. I mean,
acoustic or.
Yeah, I think you probably would definitely mention the words acoustic and folk with what we do, and there's definitely obviously an element of storytelling. I'm not very good with genres. There's the chamber pop thing as well, and I think I come from a classical background and I play the cello, so there's definitely that kind of that texture in there, this kind of string texture, and also bassy texture with that. And then Ben plays guitar, but I think all the songs come out differently, and then we have quite an array of different, like we say, ukuleles and harmoniums and glockenspiels and bells and things like that, and we often swap around within the gigs. But it's quite hard to pinpoint it, because the books, I mean, I'm sure we have a certain style, I'm sure we do, and with the harmonies and everything, but there's definitely an element of the books will dictate where the song goes and what comes out, and particularly when we record it, it might sound a certain way when we play it live, but when we're recording, we quite often have a bit of a wish list of what else we might like on it, and it might include some other musicians, and other textures might get a tiny bit of more electronic sound in there at times. Yeah. So it's quite hard to pinpoint it, but I'm sure you'd put it into some kind of folk acoustic thing, contemporary folk.
Yeah, it's not traditional by any means, but
no. But we have played at folk clubs and it's gone down really well. But it's quite hard to tell people or convince people that it's appropriate for that thing, because they think it's very specifically about books. But we talk quite a lot about the books before we sing the songs, but without trying to give too much away of the story. Yeah. But they're very relevant, and then we describe what we felt about it, and like how it's a bit like a book club or something, where we don't have any. We're not the be all. It's not the be all end all kind of. We're not the people dictating what the story is, but our response is a certain thing, which we can then share with the audience. So it's nothing clever, necessarily that clever about it. It's just our responses.
Yeah. What instruments do you both play then? You mentioned a couple then.
Yeah, I play cello and ukuleles mostly. I've got my grade 8 recorder. Doesn't often come out in a bookshop gig, but occasionally.
Mm-hmm. I've seen you play 2 recorders.
Yeah, I've done 2 recorders at the same time.
Yeah. Sure.
Yeah, and then we sing. But Ben sometimes plays. We've got a song where you play harmonium, guitar, and ukulele in the same song at the same time.
I play about one note on each one. So sounds more impressive than it is. Yeah, I guitar. I mean, I grew up learning guitar and piano. I don't really play piano very much. Certainly not in a bookshop context.
No.
No room in the car. But so yes, it ends up, and Beth kind of has introduced me to ukuleles. I've never played one before.
No.
Really.
And then I think sometimes the book can give a certain something that might make you think, oh, that instrument would work really well. And it's not necessarily an instrument that we play very well, but it might be just something that feels like it's the right thing. Or if Ben's taken the lead on a song, to looking around for an instrument that might work with that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's cool. How often do you release an album then? Because you had that year where you did 9, you say.
Yeah. So we started in September 2010, and we released our first album in December 2010, and then we released 3 more a couple of years later, and we got around to recording the rest of the songs. Then we had a little pause for a year, and then we released another 9 albums the next year, and that was in 2014. So we're actually, or 15. We've actually been at least 3 years now without releasing any albums, probably more. I mean, we did, when we released one a month for 9 months, I don't know if we really released them in any tangible way. So they're kind of always constantly being released. But yeah, we'll release 2 albums in the next year. I think this live American album and then another studio album.
Yeah, so I was going to say, actually, you mentioned a studio album. Like, what's your workspace like from where you write the stuff, and then you have like your own studio at home, or do you go to a studio?
We kind of write the songs wherever we can.
They've been written on doorsteps, been locked out the house.
In cars.
They've been written in cars on the way to a gig.
So
it doesn't matter what space quite often for the writing.
No, anywhere that there is space and a bit of time.
Yeah.
Generally on the day that we have to perform them, to always write them on the day, pretty much. And then recording wise is quite interesting because we've lived in various places. We've got a nice little home studio set up that can be very portable, so we'll do some things at home. But when for example, when we did the 9 albums, so that was like 120 songs that we recorded over the course of a year. What we would do is look at the spaces we had available to us and then decide which songs would suit those spaces. So, if we do some at home, but then we knew that we'd have access to a church for a week because we were house sitting, a church sitting someone's cats. So we were right, we're in a church for a week. What songs should we record in a church? With that whole different ambience, or what songs would we actually have to go into a studio to record?
Yeah, in a big church would sound different.
Totally full of like different ambience. You
Yeah.
get the big churchy echo. So it's So it was really fun. It was really adaptable. We'd just sit down and have a wish list of we're in this place for a few days, which songs would suit, and sometimes we'd record some in bookshops and some in the author's house, so we'd go to like Louis de Bernier's house for a couple of days and record the song with him with his instruments playing in his shop, so it's in his house. And so it's almost like when we record, it kind of feels like, well, what would make the best story, and what feels like the most appropriate thing in terms of the story and in terms of the song. That's kind of how we decide how to record. But actually, the next album is going to be a studio album in a really, really nice studio owned by Pete Townsend from The Who. So he's going to be, that's a huge treat for us to be in a different thing for us to be in an actual studio.
What's like the division of labour between making writing and performing on different songs? Is it just the book that would dictate?
Yeah, I mean, and do you mean between us
you
as
two,
well?
yeah.
I think it depends how much time we've got. For example, we've got 2 songs to write this week, and so it requires reading the books, obviously, and one of them we've finished, the other one we're both still reading. So it depends where we're at with it and how much time we've got without Molly to be able to concentrate on doing it. But we try and do it quite fairly. Like if Ben's done the last one, then I might do the next one in terms of taking the lead. But then we very often might have an idea and then collaborate for the rest of it, and obviously kind of come up with all the rest of the parts and vocals and harmonies and things. But in terms of words and initial kind of song structure, we might start by ourselves and then come together, but we try and keep it quite equal, don't we?
Yeah, in the early days when we had time, we generally both read the book, both take the lead on a song, and generally get 2 songs for every book, because we'll both have our kind of personal responses, as anyone would to reading a book. They would have their own personal responses, so we both take the lead, get a couple of songs out, and then feed back on each other's to build up the song. And now, yeah, it's just literally a pragmatic question of time as to who can finish the book in time. Exactly, Molly. Well said. Yeah, but it's a great and very occasionally when we've the luxury of actually being able to sit down from scratch, we'll take a lead mutually together and do things too, or write a verse and Beth will do a chorus or something like that. So that there is no set structure other than leaving it to the last minute and just doing what we do and trusting each other to do that, and it will be great, and we'll just build on it. And
Yeah, so how long would it typically take to write a song? If you like leave it to the last minute, you've got to do it in a certain amount of time.
I think we'll just do it in that certain amount of time. It's the reading, I would say, that takes the time, and then the songwriting. I think almost the more of a deadline you've got, the quicker you can kind of, the more it's pressure, but it's also limitations, which are sometimes quite useful.
Yeah, do you do any like speed reading techniques to get through them, or do you just do it?
We're both pretty slow. We're both slow readers.
Yeah.
I can only read at the speed that my parents would read me a story in bed. Any faster doesn't make any sense in my head. Yeah, we just. I mean, in theory, you could write a 4-minute song in 4 minutes if you were like totally at one with yourself and just went with the flow and knew exactly what you wanted to say and knew where your fingers were going to go on the instrument. So, like with that in the back of our heads, a day seems like a really long time to write a song.
Yeah, the books can be so inspirational. They do dictate it a lot, and we won't necessarily use the. We don't necessarily do retellings or use the words, but sometimes some of the words might come in, and but I do really feel like they are the inspiration.
Yeah,
and
you take notes as you read, or
generally not, and occasionally if I see a phrase that I think is really beautiful or something that really stands out, which I might do anyway if I was reading a book, but generally I try not to think about the fact that I've got to write a song at the end and just enjoy it for what it is, and then maybe go flick back and go, where's that bit that I thought was really nice, and so.
Do you do both fiction and non-fiction, or do you stick to one?
Mostly it's fiction, but we've had a few non-fiction books. The most recent being the Robert Macfarlane Underland book.
Yeah, that's the next question. I saw on your Instagram you had the picture with him in the book. I've just got it, but I've not started it yet.
Oh, they're so good.
Do you work with authors like that in that capacity a lot to do a bit of a promotion? Or?
Rarely, actually.
Yeah, I've done a tiny bit.
I mean, Mr. B's has been like 95% of the songs we've written have come through a collaboration with that bookshop, and then a few have come through like commissions from literature festivals or museums, or we've worked with the V&A, but through Mr. B's it's always contemporary fiction, just because that's their thing. With the V&A we did some Shakespeare songs, or with the Oxford Literary Festival we did some Alice in Wonderland, Lewis Carroll. So like everyone with those, what we see is there are other opportunities for getting a different type of book through, and with Underland, that was, I mean, there's actually associations with Robert and Stanley Dodd with Mr. B's, but that one came through just a contact with the author, because Beth had been working with him on the Lost Words spell songs, and we approached Robert and said, would he like a song, just because we absolutely wanted to do it, you know, again because it would be a different kind of book for us, and yeah. So yeah, it's normally we don't choose the books, but we, in a sense, chose that one.
Yeah.
Which was really nice.
So it's a good book.
It's wonderful.
Like looking over from when you started at doing what you're doing around bookshops, how has that niche like developed and like taken you on then over time? Like where do you think it's looking in the future? Is it like picking up? Or?
Good question. Yeah, I think there's always new opportunities and always people that won't have heard of us. I mean, one of the things is that we haven't yet played much in the music world, and this tour with the Unthanks that we have this next month will be a great opportunity to play in some bigger venues and to share our music with people that may not have heard it before, and that the Unthanks are doing an Emily Bronte album, so they thought that we'd be quite fitting for the thing, but they already have a music crowd, so that's really great for us to take that out. And then we started our kind of relationship with American bookshops at the beginning of this year, and so we might carry that on, and we're actually going to Canada for a little bookshop tour in November. So there's always things, and there's always new books being written, and brilliant books all over the place that have been written, and actually lots of new literature festivals, book festivals popping up all over the place, and they're a really good way of getting people to talk about books and getting people into a town to, you know, have a share a joy of reading and books.
Yeah. Have you been to any bookshops in Manchester?
What have we done?
We've played the Manchester,
the literary festival we've done in Manchester. We've done one in Chorley.
Yeah.
Is that true?
Ebb and Flow.
Ebb and Flow.
Yeah.
What else have we done near Manchester? I feel like we must have done more. I don't know if we have. Can you recommend any bookshops?
See, the one that I know mainly, I think it's only open at the weekends now.
Okay.
Or like Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday or something like that. Paramount Books, that one's called.
Okay.
And then there's a specialist one which is about arts and fashion and stuff like that. But that's only quite small.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's what I mean. We played in tiny spaces. But we'd love to do, and we might be going back to do some music related things in Manchester as well. But yeah, I don't think we've done that many in the area. We should do though.
Yeah, there's a couple of Waterstones as well. There's two for some reason.
Yeah.
In the city centre.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean it is difficult. Because we have to do a big tour to make it financially viable.
Yeah.
But Manchester's a great stop-off point for us if we're going south, so we should try and find somewhere.
The literary festival's on now, I think, isn't it?
Is it?
Yeah,
okay. Yeah, maybe it is. Yeah.
I can't remember the dates. It's something like 3 weeks, 4 weeks, maybe.
Okay.
Wow. Yeah. No, it was lovely. We'd love to go back and do that.
Yeah. Do you have to get any sort of, or do you get any pushback by like councils from doing this? Like, does the shop need permission for the use of putting on like a little gig?
It's interesting actually. Like when we were touring bookshops, it was a question that Bookshop asked, like, do I need to get a PRS license to host a music event in the bookshop? And so I phoned up PRS and I was like, well, do we need to buy a PRS license for doing this? And they were like, yes, it costs like 45 quid. And I said to PRS, well, that's like a quarter of the entire money that's going to be generated from that. We've got another costs of 80 quid. Like, it's just having a PRS license, having to buy a PRS license stops the gig happening in the bookshop. So I actually got an email back from PRS after a lengthy chat saying that we didn't need to get a PRS license for playing in a bookshop. So I've got that email somewhere, and that's what I tell bookshops. But I do. We are PRS members, and we.
Well, if you get your book done, you can just say that you're doing a book event.
Yeah. I mean, they are
play
book
songs.
Yeah.
They are book events.
Hello.
Yeah. Anyway.
Can I get you some?
But
Next one, pretty much ready to finish now.
Great.
Just a couple of like quick fire questions. What books do you like personally read outside of doing songs about them?
I don't know.
Not many. But I quite like. I mean, I quite like travel books and things that would take me somewhere else. That I don't know. I went to India when I just left school, and I think So I think when I just left school, that was really what I was into, was reading books about other places and around the world and people's travels and sometimes the history of them as well. And I didn't actually think that I liked fiction for some stupid reason. Although I'd done English literature at A-level and I'd enjoyed that. Yeah. But then I think as soon as we started doing these Mr. B's events and reading the books, I just realised how vast and brilliant some of the fiction world was. So you're on this chair. Why don't you go on this chair? Molly wanted to go on the chair. So now I feel like I've widened and I didn't think I liked fantasy, and then read David Mitchell's Bone Clocks and was like, that's one of the best books I've ever read. And, he's sitting on there for now. There'll be another chair. There's lots of other chairs, sweetheart.
Yeah, I used to read travel books, bit of sci-fi, bit of comedy, what actually really got me back into reading after a stint of not was just going through some Victorian classic yarns like She and the Moonstone. I just absolutely loved reading those. So
What are you reading right now?
Right now, I'm reading Margaret Atwood's Testaments.
Oh, is that the new one?
Yeah.
So we're doing that's the next song that we've got to do as well, and then the other song we've got to do is one about Jackie Morris's book, which is called House Without Windows, which is an event we're doing next Saturday at the book festival.
So Ben, what book do you gift to somebody or recommend to somebody the most?
Do you know what one that we often recommend is Burton and Swinburne and the Strange Affair of Spring-Heeled Jack by Mark Hodder, and it's a steampunk novel, and it's just really good fun. It's just a fantastic yarn, and a great holiday book. It's a debaucherately good read.
That's the end of it.
Great, thank you very much.
Do you have any social media you want to shout out, a website?
We've got thebookshopband.co.uk. Twitter is at the Bookshop Band. There's probably a Facebook and a YouTube somewhere. I think just search us and we'll probably pop up.
Yeah, you'll pop up.
Yeah.
Right, well, appreciate your time. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Cheers.
Meeting Beth and Ben from the Bookshop Band was a pleasure. Make sure you follow them on Twitter and Instagram at the Bookshop Band, and visit their website, get some of their music, show them some love. That is thebookshopband.co.uk.